Nobody's going to do that. Like people look at me like I've got freaking horns growing out of my head. And I'm like, no, but that's what you do for your homeowners policy. Like it's not really any different, right?
Welcome to the Real Construction Owners Podcast. We have a special guest, Jen Silver. How you doing?
I am great. Thank you for being flexible with my schedule with all this traveling. It can make it a little bit crazy, but I appreciate it.
All good. I see you're traveling. You going to an event to speak?
This is actually our third stop on the tour. We're in Denver. The first two we did Minneapolis and Indianapolis, and so here we are now in Colorado.
Right on. And talk to our audience. What is it that you do, and how do you help contractors?
When I started my own roofing company a few years ago, I had a really hard time understanding the insurance proceeds model and why another entity would be able to dictate the profitability of my business or tell me how much I could charge to complete a roofing project. I also knew I couldn't float AR from a cash flow standpoint, being a brand new business, to do the traditional insurance proceeds model. And I wasn't going to do things the way they'd always been done just because that's the way it had been done. From a business standpoint, it logically didn't make sense. So I chose to do all insurance related work the same way I would do any roofing project, which is sell a retail contract. From an insurance proceeds, I would offer financing to our consumer. And then they had the freedom to do with their proceeds whatever they wanted. They wanted to keep the low monthly payment and spend the $15,000 or $20,000, paying off debt. I had cars, various different things. Then they could do that. But ultimately, they could also pay off their loan and be done with the project. And we completed projects very quickly. We didn't get into the whole negotiating, supplementing, arguing with the insurance companies. We left the homeowner in control of their claim, which they should be. I mean, I would say at least 50% of customers that we run into don't even know who their insurance carrier is. And, if you looked at that from the medical side, we all know who our insurance company is because we're forced to deal with it. But in the homeowner side, roofing contractors and restoration contractors have taken care of it. And so we've almost disabled the consumer in having power and knowledge around it. Our consumers were getting reimbursed based on our estimate with no complications. And it was a very smooth and simple process. Originally, when I started speaking in the industry about and teaching contractors how they can incorporate the same model into their business, I really thought that the restoration industry's biggest challenge was the insurance proceeds model. And I do think that is a big challenge, but I think even more so than that, most roofing contractors get started without business background. And some of them end up finding mentors or masterminds or get coaches and gain that knowledge, but there's a lot of them that don't. And the amount of contractors that I would run into that didn't know the difference between gross profit and net profit, or know how to job cost, or know what their margins truly were, that's when I realized that was really the bigger challenge. So we're teaching contractors how to run a business by the numbers, how to be profitable, how to sustain some of the changes that are going on in the industry, the economic challenges that we're running into, along with how to have control over their business as an owner.
Yeah, we can't depend on insurance money and all the mortgage nonsense. It's so important. I like that you're breaking out of like the mold of what everybody else is doing, because as an owner myself, I've been through that. Every robust construction company has to have a retail sector in order to collect their money quickly. And I've seen your name online, and I see there's a lot of pushback going on with what you're teaching. And I wanted to come directly to you and have a conversation. Why is there pushback, and why are people saying like whatever they're saying? I don't have time for any of that. But I think it's just that people have a hard time learning a new, they have a hard time learning a new uh, way of doing business.
Part of the challenge is people think it's too simple to be true, right? That all of the adversity that contractors face in the insurance proceeds model, that the homeowner is going to face those same challenges. But in reality, let's do this example, okay? Okay, so Justin, I'm gonna buy a roof from you today, and I'm gonna give you my deposit. Let's call it $1,000. I'll sign the contract, we can get started. But I need you to know that my dad's actually gonna pay for my roof down the road. I'm not exactly sure how much my dad's gonna pay you for the roof. And I also, honestly, I don't know exactly when he's gonna pay you for the roof. But just know we're all good. Like, I'm going to sign your contract and I'll give you my deposit and we can go ahead and get started, right?
That sounds like ridiculous what you just said.
It does. But when you take out dad and you put insurance company there, that's what the insurance proceeds model is. And
Yep.
the challenge is, it makes sense why we wouldn't sign that contract if somebody's dad was paying for it, because we understand that we have no contractual obligation to the dad to be able to go after him for those monies or for what's due. And the fact that we don't even know what we're going to collect on it ultimately or when makes no sense. But when we look at it from an insurance proceeds model, somehow we think that we have the power to collect from these insurance companies, when in reality, we don't, because they're not contractually obligated to us. It's a very simple contract conversation, but they are contractually obligated to pay their consumer. And that is why their consumer does not run into the same challenges in the indemnification process that we do as contractors when we get in the middle of something that we shouldn't be in the middle of.
Simple enough. We just need to teach our salesmen and women how to become better salespeople, write a quote, sell it through financing, and then let the homeowner ante up and take charge like they're supposed to take charge. And if the insurance doesn't want to pay them, tell the homeowner, hey, you have appraisal as an option, you have the attorney as an option. Is that kind of how you sold it? Can you walk us through the sales process, how you would sell it to the homeowner? Okay, yeah. So Jen, we had some bad connection, but you were about to drop some bombs. Talk to us about like how you sell this to your homeowner, because you were saying, we need to educate the homeowner about the process, and we're not a public adjuster, so we can't talk about policy.
Right.
So do me a favor and shine some light how you would sell this.
Sure. So there's a few different things, and I talk about 5 key areas when I'm talking to contractors on how you explain this to your homeowner. Medical analogies is really effective. So heaven forbid your child has to go see a pediatric cardiologist. In the medical world, you get to choose the cardiologist and the specialty, and typically you don't want the cheapest medical doctor, right? Because cheap usually means there's something going on. And so we talk about, why would you not want to choose your contractor for your largest asset being your home, and your roof being that protects your home? And that helps people understand why they have choice around that, and why it's important for them to choose who they want based on quality, trust, warranties, whatever that is, rather than, the insurance's preferred contractor. We talk a lot about using the pain points in the media, as far as roofing contractors commit fraud, and the fact that roofing contractors go out of business. I think we can all agree that all contractors, or all types of people, are capable of committing fraud. There's bad people in every industry. So I use that and I say, look, I'm sure you've heard about roofing contractors that go out of business, or, those that commit fraud. And that, unfortunately, in the model where I am talking and negotiating with your insurance for you, which is called, we do it for the insurance proceeds, that model makes those things much more likely. It takes contractors a long time to get paid, and they do go out of business because they cannot float the accounts receivables that are associated with continuing to sustain. I'm not going to go out of business. I'm committed to being here. Heaven forbid that you have a problem with your roof. And the only way that I can guarantee that is by making sure that I control my business. You know, I have to make enough money to pay for my overhead costs and have a reasonable net profit to grow and sustain. Now,
okay, so you did 1 and 2 medical example number 1, number 2 pain points, roofing, fraud, contractor stories, number 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, so the next part is policy, right? How do you talk to them and educate them on their policy? That can be a really challenging thing to navigate because there's only some things that you can say. And really the only time it's ever safe is about your own policy. And even that can be a slippery slope. So what we do is, you know, I have a great relationship with a public adjuster who will do those policy reviews for me because he knows at the end, if the consumer has any challenges, he's obviously going to be the guy that they go to. I explain to consumers, this is kind of another part outside of the policy, but I explain to them that I'm a contractor and my job is to make sure that their roof is put on the right way with proper codes, manufacturer specification, proper documentation. I can't get into the policy side because I'm not a legal professional. And there are actually laws that prohibit me from having those conversations, which is why I have to put you in touch with somebody who can. So it's been somewhat of a challenge in the industry to have consumers or every contractor to have somebody that's willing to do that policy review for them. So actually in the next couple of weeks, I am filming a YouTube series with some of the big attorneys in the industry and some big public adjusters and some contractors. And we're going to break down a series on insurance, what you need to know about your policy, very, very basic. What's the difference between ACV and RCV? You know, what does it mean if you have code upgrade? What is your deductible? You know, briefly going over the loss settlement provision, questions to ask your insurance company when buying a policy, understanding, you know, what exclusions actually do. Yes, they may make your policy cheaper, but what does that look like in the long term? And then we're also going to do a series on how to vet a contractor, right? How to look up licensing, what's proper insurance, like what does it mean to have a manufacturer's specific or manufacturer's backing, and you know, what's appropriate questions to ask your contractor? How do you know if they're a qualified contractor? Because I think the problem is both sides, right? And when I look at the industry as a whole, I try not to look at it from a what's best for insurance companies or what's best for contractors. I try to look at things from what is best for the consumer, because we're all consumers, and everything that happens from a consumer standpoint, whether it's changes in policy or law or whatever, affects all of us equally, whether we're on the insurance side or we're on the contractor side. So if I can stay in that lane and continue to educate consumers, the country's going to be better off regardless. So I did.
I agree. You have, this is really valuable. I mean, no matter who has an opinion about you, Jen, like I said, I wanted to talk to you because I'm open-minded and I'm a owner of a company. I've been in the trenches for years, and now I have an organization, an army of people working for me. And I knew that there was value from your perspective. And with that being said, I'd love for you to continue sharing the 5 ways that you sell this. What's number 4?
So 4 was in the UPA laws, right? Which I briefly touched on. I spend time educating consumers on why I can't do it legally. And there's a lot of contractors out there that don't necessarily even understand the true nature of UPA laws, like in Utah, for example, and every state is different. And it's really important for contractors to look up the specific laws in their state. But in the state of Utah, I can't look at a scope of loss and tell a homeowner what is missing. Right? I can't say drip edge isn't on here. This isn't on here. This isn't on here. I literally can't go there. And I lobbied really hard in 2019 to keep the assignment of claim in place in Utah so that I could continue to have those conversations with homeowners. And I was successful in keeping it. However, in May of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, they did a private session and they passed a lot of reform around the AOC. And it made it so that it's really hard to keep it valid. And I knew that I would have a target on my back if I continued to try to go that route and even teeter on it. And so I just made a decision that absolutely no UPA law violations, no policy. My lane is a contractor. And when I'm explaining it to homeowners, I explain it to them like, hey, there are reasons that you can't practice medicine without a license, right? We don't want anybody walking around prescribing medicine. You don't know what the effects are on that. Like, we may think we know what amoxicillin does, or we may think that we've got the knowledge, but in reality, what about that one time that amoxicillin actually has an adverse effect? Or law, right? We don't want somebody going around and telling you what the law is and not educated around it. And the same thing goes with policy. So I have to stay in my lane. I can't talk to your insurance company at all. However, I am here for you as my customer. So questions that they ask you, things that they need, I will provide to you. But please just know, from a legal standpoint, regardless of what everybody else does, and I understand there's a lot of contractors that may not completely understand the law, but from a legal standpoint, these are the boundaries that I have to stay inside of.
Very smart about how the way you word that. Because I thank God I haven't had any issues, but I know people do have these issues. And it's so crucial that because the way the insurance restoration business is kind of forming, it's 10 years ago, it was completely different compared to how it is now and how the money works. And to build a robust retail division is a topic that every contractor needs to focus in on and dive deep and immediately start to implement it within the next year, like, because of the way things are changing.
And they're changing rapidly. And I think that the economic situation and having a recession, recession is all about the change of money, right? Like, who has the money? And I think that things that would not have maybe taken heed as quickly, like e-commerce and virtual roofing and other things like that, are going to actually have more of a chance now, because consumers are going to be more forced into buying based on price. So not having a retail, not having financing, and not being able to solve those problems for a homeowner is going to push them towards solutions that are good for some contractors, but probably not good for all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the fifth tip?
Yep. So the fifth tip is you have to arm your homeowner with the knowledge of the obstacles that you're going to come up with, right? So you've got the 3 bid rule, and you've got overcoming the objection that my estimate is going to be higher than your initial scope of loss. The 3 bid rule, I go back into, I kind of wrap that into the medical analogy. Like, if your insurance company said, hey, go pick 3 different cardiologists and get us bids and then send them to us, and we're going to tell you which one to go with. Obviously that doesn't work, right? But that's a very common, right? Nobody's going to do that. Like, people look at me like I've got freaking horns growing out of my head. And I'm like, no, but that's what you do for your homeowner's policy. Like, it's not really any different, right? But like I said, and most people, I think, don't even educate themselves on their medical policy until something's happened. And now they know what a family deductible is and an individual deductible. And now they know how a PPO works versus an HMO and, all of those things. But before they ever have to deal with it, they just kind of choose based on what they think is the best. And then they get really educated in it. And now we've got educated consumers in medical, and there's a lot more affordable healthcare. There's a lot better options out there because they know what to look for. And we're not helping them in the homeowner side until they have to experience the pains of choosing policies that were less than they should have chosen right? Because they didn't want to pay for it. So
you're arming the homeowner, you're explaining the 3 bids, you're explaining how your estimate's going to be higher. Is there anything else you do on that step 5?
So typically I ask them if they have a low monthly budget in mind for the project, right? After we've talked about that there's a claim, they have legitimate damage, I would suggest that they file that claim. It's completely up to them. That's what I've seen other homeowners do. I don't know their policy, so I can't tell them what they would get from their insurance company monetarily. However, most homeowners have, full coverage, and I would assume that their insurance company would cover this roof. Then I say, so do you have a monthly budget in mind for that project? And they look at me like I'm crazy because I kind of just told them their insurance company is going to pay, right?
Right.
And we say, well, what we find is most consumers would rather have a low monthly payment and with no prepayment penalty, with a fixed interest rate that's lower than inflation right now. So really it's free money, and have the freedom to do whatever they want with that $10,000 or $15,000. I mean, could you imagine what you would do with $10,000 or $15,000 right now? If I had $10,000 or $15,000 extra money going into a recession, I'd probably keep it in the bank and kind of see what was going to happen in case my job changed or something happened, with my house or whatever. So, and we'll have homeowners that are like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And they talk themselves into it because in reality, it is the best solution for them right now, especially with the economy where it's at. And by the time we get back there for the adjuster meeting, they're like, okay, so pretty much I spent the last 2 weeks thinking about what I could do with $10,000 or $15,000, right? Since the last time I saw you. So I am interested in going forward on that. And that makes it a much simpler conversation. And there are homeowners that don't want to finance, and that's okay. We have other options now.
And what are those? What are those options if they don't want to finance and do what we're talking about right now?
So there is a company called Captain HQ. And what they do is when you get as a contractor, you get a scope of loss in, and this homeowner doesn't want to finance. You're going to submit the scope of loss to Captain, and Captain it goes through their underwriting, and they come back and they tell you that they think the scope of loss is worth X dollars from an RCV standpoint. Okay. And as soon as you have that approval, the contractor starts the job, and they're usually within 24 to 48 hours of submitting the scope. There's no supplement.
Captain HQ submits it to the insurance?
Captain HQ takes care of everything else. So the contractor starts the job. Captain calls the contractor's supplier and pays their material. The captain pays the contractor's labor, and Captain pays the contractor's sales commissions. Okay. As soon as the job is completed, Captain sends a change order for all of the items that were left off of the roof that were already completed, similar as it's a cost incurred because the roof has been completed, with the documentation showing that those items were necessary. The way that Captain makes money is they charge 1.25% per week. There's a cap, and I think it's at like 6 weeks, but 1.25% per week from the time the job is completed until the insurance company pays. And right now their average is about 22 days. So when you look at Captain's fees in comparison to dealer fees on loans, for the most part, it's a wash. So it doesn't matter as long as you've built those fees into your general overhead, which we'll talk about, but it doesn't matter what way a consumer goes. As a contractor, you're still not managing cash flow. You're still not wasting the time supplementing and arguing with insurance companies, and you're actually able to sell more jobs, follow up on other customers, give better customer service, and have a business that sustains.
That's interesting. This is like beyond the box kind of thinking. How did you find out about Captain HQ? This is its own topic right here. And
yes, it is. And so oddly enough, they came up to me at SRC this past year and wanted to talk to me, and I'm listening, and I said, no, I don't, that's illegal. I cannot see that passing, like what from a UPA standpoint, from this standpoint. And I'm asking him all these questions. And and his name's Heath, and he goes, I think you need to talk to the CEO. And I was just kind of like, yeah, okay. Another company, because I get calls from a lot of companies that want my advice, and I'm okay with that, but oftentimes they ignore it. And so it becomes like almost pointless of time for me, right? But I said, sure, I'll meet him. So he actually came out to the IRE, which was a few weeks later. The CEO, his name's Demetrius Gray. And we sat down and talked, and we probably talked for 2 hours. And, we talked about how the two models can work together, and they had not launched officially yet, but what they could do and how we can make everything work from a synergy standpoint, and how they can be the solution for those homeowners that either A, can't qualify for financing or don't want to finance. And the relationship has continued to evolve, and they've now officially launched. And I know I'm their biggest partner referral source, because it is the best thing for contractors to never have to have Xactimate, to never have to have a supplementer. I mean, they save money in overhead. They can apply that to other things, whether it's training, whether it's branding, whether it's recruiting, and they can grow their business when they get out of the lane that they shouldn't be in and stay in their lane as contractors.
So with this Captain HQ technique, you've recommended it to contractors? Have you got any testimonials from past contractors who said, hey, I did it and it worked?
From every contractor that I know that's tried it, they love it. Now, Captain, it's a vetting process, right? Because they're just like a bank. They're funding contractors. They do check licensing. They check certifications. They, you have to have a certain level of integrity. If you're a contractor, you call and say, no, I don't want you to pay my sales commission before you pay me. That's probably a problem. In all reality, because you're not thinking from an employee mindset and what the right thing to do is. But the services and what they're doing for the industry has been unbelievable. And I don't know if you know Morgan Walker. She's a part of the APA as well. Absolutely amazing human being. And she went to work for them. And Morgan and I have, been friends for a while.
Is that the blonde-headed chick with like a shaved head?
No, that's Heather. That's
okay.
Heather. Morgan is from Texas. She's also blonde though, but a little bit more conservative than Heather is. Both equally awesome and fun. Morgan's just more of the customer relations, building vendors and sponsors, and Heather, I think, manages more around new memberships and things like that.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. I definitely want to talk to this Captain HQ guy that you're referring to. And, I can see why there's been pushback in the industry with this new face, this woman named Jen Silver. She's coming in, she's teaching something that's the way it should be. We sign a contract, we get paid half down, we get paid right when we finish a job, period. That's how construction works. But we are like, oh no, we'll get our money from the insurance. And people are saying, well, what's the step if they sign it, they finance it, we get our money, and the homeowner doesn't get that money? Like, how do we educate our homeowner to get that money? Is it through recommending to PA an attorney? What's your stance on that?
An attorney is the best route because it's a cost incurred letter. Like, I've talked to a lot of attorneys and I've talked to a lot of public adjusters, and all of them agree that not using Xactimate and sticking to our lane makes their lives much easier. And having contractors not in the middle of the claim process really simplifies a lot of things. It protects public adjusters more from being accused of colluding. It protects attorneys from, getting the right information and dealing solely with their client, not have a contractor interjecting because they need to get paid. So we have not had any real problem. And I've had a couple customers, I think one in Oklahoma, and the attorney sent a letter to the insurance company and it was paid in like a day. Because they're contractually bound to the cost incurred, which is what's different, and they're not contractually bound to the insurance proceeds model. So I completely understand why there's been pushback. And, I wasn't really seeking this out. I never wanted to be like, oh, hey, look at me. I know what I'm doing, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like, I'm still a new roofing contractor and a new business owner. I just happened to decide to do things a way that I knew I could make work. And for those people that want to learn, I want to share. But more importantly, whether you're doing an insurance proceeds model or you're doing, a retail model or you're doing lump sum, I think the most important part is understanding your margins as a company. Like, we focused so much on maximizing line items. And, if they're not going to pay for drip, let's add ropes and harnesses and porta potties and supervision hours and, all of these things to try to compensate. But in reality, I feel like if we had stopped and taught owners what is true overhead, what's a reasonable draw or salary to pay yourself based on the type of entity you have, and when to settle. Like, if you're at a 45% gross margin and that's where you need to be, and it's at 45% and drip edge isn't on there and starter isn't on there, but maybe waste is a little bit higher, who cares? Who cares what's listed? You have enough money to produce the job and to pay your overhead and to make a profit. So don't worry about the fighting of the frivolous items. But because I think contractors don't know where those numbers are, they fight because they think they have to have it all. So this conference isn't so much, yes, I do talk about the retail model for about half a day on day 2, but a day and a half of it is not centered around that. It's centered around having a business that sustains, knowing your numbers, knowing, where do you go for recruiting? How do you have a culture that has accountability? What is this, e-commerce roofle and mergers and acquisitions and roll-ups and these new virtual roofing companies and the technology that's available? Like, what is all of this stuff going on in the industry? And what's your end game as a contractor? If you don't know where you're trying to get, you don't know if one of those options is good for you or not. Somebody approaches you about rolling up. If you don't know your business's profitability or know where you're at from an EBITDA standpoint, how do you know if what they're offering you is reasonable? So, right?
Real talk, dropping bombs right here. So I'm just curious, why are you doing this? You're putting a lot of effort. You're kind of like getting the arrows in the back. You're the chief who's like going into the battlefield and taking the arrows for people. Like, why?
Because somebody has to. At some point.
Okay.
So I believe that my mission in life is to re-empower America. Okay, that's a really, really big mission, and I understand that. And if we had more time, I would talk to you about the plane crashing into my house and me realizing that I don't listen to my intuition enough and promising that I would. And whether you call it intuition, God, the universe, whatever word you use for that, I feel like they're interchangeable. For me, it's God. And when that plane crashed into my house and I literally argued with him for an hour about going and picking up my children, and I finally gave in, and I missed the crash by 14 minutes with my kids in the car. There's a sense of
purpose.
Yeah, and commitment. And I promised I would do what I felt like he told me to do. And I feel like the biggest problem that we have is that we're disabled. We're victims. We don't have personal accountability, and it has to start somewhere. So starting in contractors and, trying to teach them how to reclaim control of their business and re-empower them in that role. And then I want to move into the consumer sector and spend time in consumer education. My partner and I are going to be starting a podcast called How to Adulting 101, the shit they should teach you, but don't, right? And all of this stuff, like how to do your taxes, how to file for unemployment, how to understand your insurance policies, what to look at in a medical, what do you do if you get laid off? What is COBRA? All of the things that people just don't get to learn. And long term,
are just too lazy to learn.
We don't teach it though either.
Yeah.
As parents, there's so many single family homes now, and one parent is thinking the other parent is going to do it, and both of them ultimately be like, Google can handle it, right?
Yeah, true.
They'll learn via Google. And that's not true. You can't find those things on Google. You can find other things, but my long-term goal is I'd like to transform high school education, and I would like to see some education reform. I'd like some practical life skills put back in there. I'd like to teach financial literacy. I want a semester of a game called life, where they're in a group of 2 or 3 kids and they make a decision at the beginning of the semester whether they're going to go to trade school, they're going to go straight to work, or they're going to go to college. And the teacher gives them different things that happen. Maybe their wife is pregnant and they lost their job at the same time, or they got a raise and their cost of living hasn't changed. What do they do with the extra money? Like things that are real life adult situations that they can spend time and work together and do interviews and actually learn how to be adults. Like adulting is a verb because we don't have just a straight line to adult anymore. There's like various stages of adulting, and that's crazy. I was an adult at 18. I moved out second I graduated from high school, and I've never lived at home again. I've made it work. I've had hard times, don't get me wrong, but I felt capable. I look at kids these days and they're not. I can't even imagine them. They don't even understand what true life responsibility looks like because they're shielded and we're busy and we don't talk to them, and it's not done in school.
Wow, we should definitely do a round 2 at some point when I don't have back-to-back podcasts lined up. I'm curious, what is it that you're promoting? What is it that how can a contractor benefit from you, Jen?
Well, I do a few things. We've got the tour going on right now. Today or tomorrow starts our 3rd stop in Denver. We still have 7 more cities after that. You can check that out at the oneindustry1model.com website if you're interested in attending. Ticket prices are low. We did that on purpose because most of the contractors that really would benefit from this event are probably in a cash flow crunch, being that it's summertime and storm season, and we understand that, and sponsors have been very awesome to support the event. The other thing that I do is I do come into private companies and spend a couple days and coach one-on-one, both on understanding each other in the workplace. I do, work trade assessments and help management teams know how to cohesively work together. I come up with marketing strategies that are outside of the box of what most people normally do. And then I will help develop sales cycles and standard operating procedures based on that market and the education that the contractor can tell me specifically about that market. So it just depends on what individuals want to do, because some people may not want to go into a group and talk about the challenges, and I understand that. However, almost everybody has the same challenges in what I found. And so being there together, they actually benefit considerably. But I do private consulting as well.
Private consulting, you also have this event. Is there some type of financing that you're promoting, or do we find our own financing?
Nope. I have several different financing companies that I go over, and I don't think there's a right or wrong financing company, but they are different. The only one I have a question.
I have a question for you. I got a solar metal roof. It's over almost 200 grand, and Goodleap can't finance it because their limit. Do you have a recommendation for that big of a loan?
I don't know anybody that goes up to that high. Some of the credit unions might. Do they have equity in their home?
Yeah, that's kind of what they're going to have to do, because Goodleap will do.
Most of them cap at like 125 or 150. You could probably do 2 separate loans.
That's what we're already told them. Yeah.
Yep. That's probably the only 2 options out there. Most exterior projects just don't go to that high of a dollar amount.
So curious, are you still in contracting, or are you now focused in this realm?
So I still own my roofing company. Right now, I generate anywhere from 5 to 15 organic leads a week with no advertising. And so I am selling those to my local competitors that I know are going to take care of the customers that have sought me out. I'm deciding what I'm going to do this fall when I come back. I'm rolling up a couple companies with my partner, and we're kind of looking at, maybe having Roofing Utah do commercial and government work as a woman-owned business, having the company that he owns do residential re-roofing, and then have maybe a solar division, and then I also own a GC company. So we're, you know, kind of in the process of how are we going to navigate the industry changes as well? And what does that look like from a multiple business standpoint, and the benefits of having it rolled up into one if we were to sell down the road, because there's so much more value in every single company having their own thing and their own operating procedures. So that's kind of where I'm at in all of that.
Have you ever won a government contract?
I haven't ever bid one.
Well, you and I should have a conversation. When you get to that point, I own Federal Construction Summit. I teach contractors how to win high-paying government contracts nationwide without getting stuck in the red tape.
I've won over $1 million+ in government contracts, and I also have a woman-owned business.
And we've done projects all over, from Alaska
I
to
would
Hawaii.
love that, because it's just a sector I don't know about yet. That's why I haven't done it. I am pretty much done with my 8A certification. I just have not.
Wow. You're done. So 8A, like if you can get 8A certified, the government will give you.
I know.
Last I checked, it's $6 or $8 million a year in contracts.
Yeah, I went through it all. I mean, and I'm considered an economically disadvantaged woman because I'm not liquid 750, and I just haven't done anything with it because I don't know. I know, Justin, your mind's blowing, but I had this like strategic plan of 2022 was going to be around commercial government work. 2023 was metal, you know, I was going to grow, but then I spoke last year and my life has gone a completely different direction. And now it's trying to figure out how all of those moving parts can intertwine and I can still do what I believe my life mission is and run and own a successful roofing company. Yeah,
man, that's beautiful. Everybody has seasons in life, and this is a season of your life where you're giving back, you're contributing, you're finding significance from the vision or the epiphany that you had from the creator, and you're in that season right now.
I am.
And everything's a season. So I look forward to seeing the journey of what you do with this and what you do with government. Reach out to me when you're ready.
I will. I appreciate that very much.
For sure. And if somebody wants to reach out to you or find out more, how can they do so?
The best place is to probably either find me on social media. If you Google Jen Silver, and you're a roofing contractor, I will probably be the top person that comes up. But I've got lots of videos out there. And then I also have a website that you can go and reach out to me directly at jensilver.co. I do respond to everything, whether it's a message on Instagram or Facebook or an email, however it works for people. Sometimes it takes me a day or two, but I literally respond to everybody.
And this has been a blast. I look forward to having round two with you. Thanks so much, Jen.
I'll talk to you soon.